Welcome to the Millennial Rant, a podcast about whatever's bothering me today. With topics ranging from politics to pop culture, there's a rant to cover everyone. For more Millennial Rant content, you can join me on the web at millennialrant.com. So I gotta ask, is tugging pigtails something that's genuinely hardwired into male DNA? Because my 6-year-old nephew straight up tugged my pigtails earlier. And every time I wear pigtails, either a guy tugs them or tells me he wants to tug my pigtails. So I don't, is that just a DNA thing? I've never had a girl ask if she could tug my pigtails. So this is a video that I've kind of alluded to in several previous videos. And since apparently I'm doing a writer-themed arc in the Millennial Rant this year, I figured now, why not? It would be a good enough time to talk about it. So what exactly are we talking about? Things I wish I knew before I became an author. Specifically, things I wish I knew before I became a traditionally published author. And there's a lot, right? I have 30 years of writing experience, if you count that construction paper book that I published when I was 6 years old. So I've learned a lot throughout the years. Definitely not an expert. Definitely not, the end-all be-all authority on publication, but I can tell you, as someone who has struggled and then gotten into the industry and then got out of the industry, my ups and downs and pros and cons. So I first started trying to publish when I was 20. I wrote a book when I was 19, and it was hot garbage, and thank goodness nobody took it, because that would have been embarrassing. Although, if you want to read it, I did actually publish the hot garbage version on Amazon so that people can see how much it's hot garbage, because I rewrote it when I was 29, and it's a lot better. That one's also going to be available. So the first one is Guardian Angel, the original manuscript, and then the second one is just Guardian Angel. And actually, the original book has been split into a trilogy, and it's been changed somewhat. Only the first book is available soon. Sometime this year, it will be available. I'm actually having the audiobook done right now. Anyway, so yeah, I tried to get that published. It did not go anywhere. And again, thank goodness, because it was garbage. But I didn't, you get stuck, right? As a writer, you think, this is the greatest book that's ever been written, and I need to share it with the whole world so that they know how amazing it is. And that's most of the time, that's not the case. But there's a certain amount of pride that comes with writing a book, and mostly with finishing a book. 80,000 words is nothing to, sneeze at. It's a lot of time and effort and commitment that goes into that. And it feels different when you finish a book, especially one of that length, where you feel accomplished, you feel on top of the world, and you should, because it's a huge accomplishment. But don't ever try to publish the first draft of anything. And best advice I can give you is go find somebody who has been in the industry for a while and have them read the first 10 pages and give you feedback, honest, genuine feedback. But brace yourself, because you're going to get a serious ego punch in the gut. So, so I wrote the book, and I tried to get it published for 3 years. No, not quite that long. 2 years. I tried to get it published everywhere. I don't know why. I was so persistent about getting this book published. And I went away to college as an undergrad, and the university that I went to, Orson Scott Card, was a it wasn't like an official on the staff all the time professor. He would like come in certain semesters and do special classes. And in 2009, he came in to do a popular fiction class, or a writing popular fiction. And basically all it was like an advanced workshopping course where we wrote stories. We had to write two stories, and we brought them into class. Everybody read them and commented on them, and that was fine. There's a lot of problems with workshopping courses for peers who are not professionals, and who are still learning themselves. It's a lot different of a process when you are with people who are slightly above you, who have already been in the weeds, as it were, and they can give you some more solid feedback. And I've had other people, but this was the first author that I knew and respected, and he read the first 2-3 chapters, probably longer than that because it was written in diary format. Regardless, he read like the first 20 pages or so, and he sat me down and he's like, okay, are you serious about this, or do you just want a pat on the head? And I was like, no, I'm serious about this. And he goes, okay. And then he told me in much nicer terms that the book was hot garbage and that it would never go anywhere. And, he pointed out, because I explained to him the whole rest of the plot, and he's like, okay, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is terrible, this needs to be fixed, this makes no sense, why would you do that? And it was hard to hear. Like, there was genuinely a part of me that was like, oh wow, I should have just said I want a pat on the head. But you don't learn from pats on the head. It's, when your parents tell you that, you're the prettiest little princess that ever princessed. That's great as an ego boost when you're a kid, but what happens when somebody tells you something that is the complete opposite, whether it's true or not? There's going to be heartache involved and a little bit of resentment. But I think I bounced back fairly quickly, and I wanted to start fixing it right away, but I couldn't because I was too attached to it as it was. And I'm very much a retainer. If I read something, I remember it for basically ever. There are a few things that will slip through the cracks, but I mostly remember everything I read. Obviously not word for word. I am not C.S. Lewis by any stretch of the imagination. But I remember, and that really comes in handy with schooling and also with teaching. Like, let me tell you, when you get 50 papers a semester and you have to go through them and read them, I don't remember students by their names or their faces. I remember them by what they wrote. Anyway, so I was too close. I was too close to it. And I tried to start rewriting it several times and it just didn't take. And so I decided I was going to put it aside and start writing something else. And so I completely switched genres from the, everyday teen superhero that one was to a romance. And so I started working on that one. I never finished that one, which is a shame because I actually really enjoy it. So I am planning on going back and finishing it. It's almost done. I think I'm like right at the start of Act 5, but this is almost done. And then didn't finish that. I started my Master's of Fine Arts program, and I had to write a book for that so that I would be able, as my capstone thesis type whatever thing. And I ended up writing The World Over. And I've talked about The World Over before. It was like a monstrosity of, almost 300,000 words. And I tried to get it published. as that monstrosity. And if you know anything about the publishing industry at all, you'll know that it's actually super difficult for a first-time author to publish a really big book. Anything over 80,000 words is going to be difficult for a new author to publish traditionally, because it's a lot of investment from the company. Not only is that, they have to read it, they have to edit it, they have to pay someone to edit it, and then they have to do continuity, and they have to make sure that the audiobook is done correctly. If there's an audiobook, there's formatting for all the it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and it's a lot of money. So if you're going to come in at them with a book over 100,000 words, you're going to have to be one heck of an author, or you're going to have to be telling one heck of a story. One person that comes to mind is Brandon Sanderson. His first book was Elantris, and I think that clocks in around 250,000 words. And that is a lot for a first book. Not so much in fantasy science fiction, but still a lot. And he, came to the table and he delivered. And that's awesome. I'm not Brandon Sanderson by any stretch of the imagination. So nobody wanted it. And I gave up. Not necessarily gave up. I just kind of stopped at a certain point, and that's a whole story in and of itself. I switched gears. So instead of focusing on creative writing as a career, I switched gears. I was going to go into communications. And I was just about to start my Master's of Arts in Mass Communications when a offer for publication came in from a relatively new press, and they wanted to publish my book, but they didn't want to publish it as it was. They wanted to publish it as 3 books, and so I had to split them up and adapt them, and that sort of thing. And that was a learning experience in and of itself, for sure. I split the first book in the wrong place. I should have split it sooner and then bulked it out instead of trying to divide the word counts so that they were more even, because then the first book ends on a cliffhanger, almost literally. One of the main characters jumps off a bridge, and that's not a good place to end the first book. A lot of people were annoyed, and they should be. But I mean, there wasn't a lot of hands-on mentoring when it came to what I was supposed to do as an author to be publishable. And so it just kind of was okay. There were continuity issues, so they use guns and things in my books, and at one point I had a different type of gun. I had an M9, but I don't know. I switched them, and for whatever reason, I think I switched it from an N9 to a Glock, and I was talking about the safety, and Glocks don't have safeties, and I know that, but I missed that when I was doing one of my rereads. I wasn't as careful as I should have been. I was relying a little bit too much on my editor, and it's not that he was a bad editor. He was actually pretty phenomenal, but he was a line editor. He wasn't a continuity editor. The continuity was up to me. That was my responsibility, and I dropped the ball in several places, and I'd be more than happy to point them out to you if you wanted to know where they are. But it was definitely a learning experience. I got some good feedback. I got some nasty feedback. I will tell you straight up that people are really mean when it comes to published books. They're just mean. And I've always kind of been that person of, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. If I read a bad book, I'm just going to put it down. I don't have to go on the internet and tell everybody how bad it was. And admittedly, I don't go on and tell people how good the books are that I read either. I should, but I don't. I'm just not that kind of a person. But it was definitely eye-opening how mean people could be. I don't read my comments anymore because I don't need that negativity. And if you enjoy my book, that's awesome. And if you don't, that's fine too. It's not the end of my world. It's not the end of your world. It's just a book. But, you have to get to that point. You have to work through your trauma, as it were, to be able to get to that point where you feel comfortable putting yourself back out there as an author after you've already had some really nasty things said about you. So prepare yourself for that. If you really want to prepare yourself for that, write bad fan fiction on purpose and post it, and you'll get all sorts of really awful, nasty things said to you and about your writing and all sorts of stuff. So that might help. I didn't write bad fan fiction on purpose, but actually, ironically, it's my good fan fiction that gets the most hate. And I think that there's a certain level of camaraderie in the fan fiction community where people want to help you succeed, but once you do succeed, then they just get mean and nasty and jealous. Not everybody, but definitely a decent amount of people, but I digress. So that was definitely a learning experience. Another thing is I didn't realize how much control I wouldn't have over the production process. They asked my opinions about the covers, and the first cover, I loved it. It was perfect. The second cover was fine. It wasn't anything like out of this world phenomenal. It was okay. I hated the third one. I really did. I really hated it so much because it just didn't represent the character that was on the cover. And when I tried to bring it up, but I'm like one of those people that doesn't really like confrontation. And so I was like, I don't really like this. And it's like, well, we've already done it and you already said and this, that. And I was like, okay. So the third cover, not a fan at all. The fourth cover, I actually thought was really cool because it could feasibly be either one of two main characters in that novel. So I was really actually very pleased with that one. And so there was that. There was a publishing error. For the third book, an old version of the book was published instead, and it was not great. It went over very poorly, and I don't know if it was ever fixed. It was fixed in the box set, but I never got a push from Amazon saying that it was fixed on Kindle. So as far as I know, it's still the old bad version. I don't know. The audiobook was interesting. I had obviously never had an audiobook done for my stories before, and I got an advance, which was really cool. But it was like the process was, again, there's no mentorship on what you're supposed to do. So the first 3 books I was given a pronunciation guide, and I had to go through and make sure that all of the words were in there that were being pronounced properly. And there were some that were missed. I guess I didn't put them in there right, or whatever the case. And so there are issues with pronunciation in some of them. And one of them, so in the second book, one of the characters, her name is Kanai, and she is Japanese Hawaiian. And so her name is pronounced Kanai in both the Hawaiian and Japanese contexts. And the reader does it right all through book 2, but then for whatever reason in book 3 he starts calling her Kanea, and I was like, what is happening there? Like, did I do that? Was that my fault? Probably. And then in book 4 I didn't get a pronunciation guide. No, they never sent it to me. I didn't even know it was getting an audiobook until like I got an advance and I didn't know where it came from or why. So there were mispronunciations all through there, even though a lot of it was still the same as in the previous books. So in the previous books, at the start, I have the date and the place and the time. And if I were to do it differently in the future, I'd get rid of the time, because the time was why. That's dumb. The date, I would probably keep the location, because there's a lot of different locations, but I would definitely get rid of the time. So in books 1 through 3, he says it right, because it's the month and then the day and then XXX and then the number 6. But it's not pronounced XXX6, it's pronounced year 6, because it's year 6 since the calendar reset. But in book 4, so he does that all through books 1, 2, and 3. He says year 6. And then for whatever reason in book 4, it's XXX6. And I'm like, why are you doing that? So it was strange. And I didn't really have any control over who was picked. There was no audition tapes that I heard or anything like that. The reader that was chosen, I really enjoyed. He had a lot of fun nuances, especially with a certain vivaciously bubbly character, which every time he did her, I just laughed because it was just so perfectly great. But there's definitely a lot more control that I have now that I am an independent author. And there's also, flip side, a lot less marketing coverage, because I have to do that myself. And if I don't do that myself, then nothing gets out there. And so, if I want to make money off of this, which isn't necessarily my goal, I write because I enjoy it, not because I need to make a living off of it. That would be nice, but I don't necessarily want my hobby to be my job, because then what would I do for a hobby? I'm not Brandon Sanderson. I don't just, pump out books on a daily basis because it's enjoyable. For one, because I don't have that kind of discipline. And for two, I don't have the time. Again, if I were like a full-time author and that's all that I did, obviously that would be my job and I would have to sit down and write. But when I sit down and write, I want to write because I want to, not because I have to, because it's my job. So now that that series is wrapped up, it's not necessarily complete. There are other books that I want to add to the series, but my contract is fulfilled, and the only thing I have to do if I write another book is let them know, hey, I wrote another book, do you want it? Most likely they'll say no. My books didn't make enough money to make publishing something else from me something that would be reasonable as a risk to take. So I switched over to self-publishing, and now I have complete artistic control over my book covers. I have complete control over the formatting. I have complete control over the continuity and the editing. And so any mistakes are my mistakes. And so I'm that much more careful because it's all on me. I can't afford a real editor because largely I'm doing this for fun. And if I were to do this, to make money, I would hire an editor. But again, it's just a lot of money for something that's not going to get a return. And, I know people who have expensive hobbies for sure. I would rather my hobby not be quite that expensive. And it's already pretty steep. Like for a book cover, I paid $500. For the audiobook, I'm paying $500. And that's a steal. Like for real. So, and all just kind of, you have to weigh and measure things. What's most important to you as an author? Do you want more control or do you want less control? Do you want to have somebody manage everything for you, or do you want to make sure that it is the way that you want it? And for me, I feel a lot better knowing that I'm putting out products that are the best that I can do. That way, it's the same reason why if I get my hair cut short, I cut it all off myself first. Because if I'm going to get mad at anybody, I'm going to get mad at me. and then somebody else can come in and fix my mistakes later. But it's not worth it to me to give up that sense of autonomy to be able to be published through a traditional publishing house. Does that mean that I'll never traditionally publish again? No. There are a few books that I want to write or have written that I feel would do very well in a commercial setting. And I will at least probably attempt to get them published through a traditional publishing house. But for the most part, I'll probably stick to indie because it's just fun and I want to enjoy the process as well as the result. To have pride in the fact that I did that. It's not for everybody. I'm definitely not saying that it is. But weigh the pros and cons. Know what you're getting into. Do your research, because find a mentor. That is the biggest thing. I wish that I had really stuck to it and allowed myself to be properly mentored. And a large part of it is because I'm extremely introverted. I don't like going out and putting myself out there. So I've missed a lot of opportunities that have come my way. I mean, there are definitely ways that I could have reconnected with Professor Card and gotten his guidance as I worked my way through the publishing industry, but I didn't. And I don't know. I don't necessarily regret it. I don't know if it would have been all that helpful to me anyway, because the series that I published had zombies in it, and apparently he doesn't do zombies. So there's that. But yeah, I feel a lot freer and less constricted now that I've switched over to indie publishing. And also largely because that's, I don't think, my calling. I'm not supposed to be this big major published author person. If people come across my writing and they enjoy it and it helps them, that's awesome. I'm glad. But I don't need to be J.K. Rowling or Orson Scott Card or Brandon Sanderson in order to make a difference in the lives of the people who read my stuff. Because the people who need it are going to find it. And the people who don't need it, well, some of them are going to find it too. And that's okay. Because writing is meant to be shared. And if you don't share it, then what's the point in writing? So, yeah. That's my 2 cents. Take it or leave it. But I hope that whatever you do, you enjoy it.